You are 62 years old, sitting on $2 million, and you are ready to retire this year. On paper, it looks like you have already won. Then you pull one extra dollar, over $84,600 in income, and your health insurance premium jumps from $7,000 a year to more than $32,000 a year. Same policy, same coverage, same person. The only thing that changed is one number on a tax form, and it just cost you $25,000. Most advisors have a simple answer for this. Keep your income under that line. Pull less from your accounts. Report less on paper. Live like your balance is smaller than it actually is, and you will qualify for a subsidy worth tens of thousands of dollars a year. It sounds disciplined. It sounds like the responsible thing to do. What almost nobody tells you is what that discipline is quietly costing you on the other side of the ledger. This video is about the $25,000 subsidy trap and why the standard advice to control your MAGI might be the single most expensive habit you build in early retirement. Before we look at the actual plans, we need to look at the one number that decides whether the system treats you as wealthy or needy. It is not your net worth. It is not the $2 million you spent 30 years building. It is a number called MAGI, Modified Adjusted Gross Income, and most retirees have never heard of it until the year it costs them thousands of dollars. If you spent 3 decades saving so you would not have to count every dollar in retirement, stay with me. This channel focuses on the real math for people in the middle, wealthy enough to have genuine choices, not wealthy enough that a mistake like this one does not matter. Here is the number that will decide your healthcare bill for the next several years. In 2026, the subsidy cliff for a married couple sits at $84,600 in income. Stay under it, and the government covers a real chunk of your premium. Cross it by even $1, and you lose 100% of that premium tax credit, all at once, not gradually. In many states, that is a loss of $1,800 to $2,200 a month, not a year, a month, for the exact same policy you had the day before. The number doing all that damage is called MAGI, Modified Adjusted Gross Income. It sounds like a small tax detail, but it decides whether you get treated as needy or wealthy by the healthcare system, and MAGI adds in things you would not expect. It counts tax-exempt interest from municipal bonds. It counts a portion of your Social Security check that never even shows up as taxable income anywhere else on your return. Money you structured specifically to avoid tax can still trigger this cliff. I've watched people build a whole retirement income plan around avoiding tax, then get blindsided the first year they apply for coverage because nobody warned them MAGI does not work like ordinary taxable income. You are not being greedy for wanting to spend the money you spent 30 years saving. You are running into a system that was built around a different kind of household, one living closer to the edge, not one sitting on a 7-figure portfolio. That is worth naming plainly, because a lot of the shame people feel here is not really about the money. It is about being told that wanting your own savings makes you look wealthy in a system that was not built with you in mind. Let's put real numbers next to this so it stops being abstract. Retiree reports $84,000 in MAGI for the year, and a silver plan on the marketplace runs about $600 a month, thanks to the subsidy. Retiree B, same age, same plan, same state, reports $85,000, just $1,000 more. And that silver plan jumps to about $2,400 a month. $1,000 of extra income turned into $21,600 more in health insurance over the year. That is not a rounding error. That is the entire subsidy, disappearing over a single dollar of reported income. So the obvious response is to just stay under the line, forever no matter what. But what if staying under $84,600 for years at a time is quietly costing you $100,000 in portfolio growth you never notice? Because it never shows up as a single bill. It shows up as money you did not make. Keep that number in your head because it explains almost everything else in this video. Every retiree living with this trap eventually lands somewhere on the same scale. On one end is lifestyle, the actual life you pictured when you were still working. On the other end is the subsidy, the government discount you get for reporting a smaller income. The uncomfortable part is that pushing hard toward one end usually means giving up ground on the other, and almost nobody tells you that trade exists until you are already living it. Meet Mark and Sarah. They are 62. They have $2,500,000 saved, and after 30 years of working, all they want to do is travel. Their real budget, the one that matches the life they pictured, runs about $12,000 a month, $144,000 a year. That is not extravagant for a couple with their savings. It is just what it costs to travel a few times a year, eat out without checking the bill first, and help a grandchild here and there. Here is the conflict nobody prepares them for. To qualify for that $25,000 healthcare subsidy, Mark and Sarah would need to cut their reported spending down to roughly $7,000 a month. Not their savings, their spending, the actual life they get to live. That is not a small adjustment. That is giving up close to half the retirement they spent 3 decades funding, just to keep a number under a line on a tax form. I used to tell people to chase the subsidy every time, because on paper the math looked obvious. Save $25,000 a year, take the win. Then I watched a client spend 3 years of his healthiest, most active retirement years sitting at home, skipping trips, eating simple meals, just to stay under that income line for a Blue Cross plan. He saved close to $60,000 in premiums over that stretch. He also lost 3 of the best years he had left to actually enjoy the money he built. Nobody hands you those years back. It is worth asking yourself honestly which side of that scale you would regret more 5 years from now. Regretting a slightly smaller portfolio, or regretting the years you spent sitting at home to protect it. So here is the real question if you are sitting on $2 million or more. Is your time worth more than $2,000 a month? For a lot of people in that position, paying full price for coverage is not reckless. It is the only way to actually live the retirement they spent 30 years building, instead of renting a smaller version of it back from the government at a discount. And the subsidy chasing does not stop at lifestyle. There is a second cost hiding in how people try to fund that gap, and it involves the one account you were told never to touch early. That account, the one most advisors tell you to protect at all costs, is exactly where the next mistake tends to hide. It rarely announces itself as a mistake in the moment. That is where the real damage starts. So if cutting your lifestyle is not the fix, plenty of advisors have a second answer. Pull the money you need from your Roth IRA instead of your traditional IRA or your brokerage account. Roth withdrawals do not count toward MAGI, so on the surface it looks like a clean way to fund your life while still qualifying for the subsidy. Here is what that advice quietly ignores. The Roth is the one account in your entire portfolio that grows completely tax-free for the rest of your life. Spending it down early, in your 60s, means spending it during the exact years it should be compounding the hardest, untouched, for decades. Picture 2 versions of the same retirement. In the first, The subsidy chaser burns through $300,000 of Roth money between age 60 and 65, just to keep Ma low enough to protect the subsidy. By the time they reach 85, that missing $300,000 would have grown to something close to $1,200,000 completely tax-free, if it had just been left alone. Instead, without that Roth cushion, they end up forced into larger required minimum distributions from their traditional IRA later in life, and a much bigger tax bill lands right when they can least afford the surprise. That tax bill does not show up labeled as a healthcare cost. It gets buried inside an ordinary-looking tax return years later, which is exactly why almost nobody connects it back to a decision made in their early 60s. The subsidy was small. The bill that replaces it later is not. In the second version, the strategic payor pays that $25,000 healthcare premium straight out of a regular brokerage account instead. It costs more today in plain dollars. But the Roth stays untouched, compounding quietly in the background for another 20 years. Run the actual math on that gap. Losing 5 years of tax-free growth on $300,000 at a 7% return works out to more than $120,000 in lost. Tax-free compounding, all to save $25,000 a year on premiums. You are not saving money with that strategy. You are borrowing against your own future at a brutal rate. So if the Roth is not the answer, and the cliff is real, and the subsidy is not free after all, what happens when a real market downturn hits while you are still trying to play this MAGI game with a straight face? Numbers on a spreadsheet are one thing. A real market downturn is another. So picture this. You retire, and in your second year the market drops 20%. That is not rare. It happens. If you spent years carefully managing your MAGI to protect a healthcare subsidy, this is where the strategy turns against you. You still need cash to live, so you are forced to sell shares at a 20% loss just to cover expenses, because you cannot pull much more without tipping your income over the cliff and losing the subsidy entirely. Your portfolio is already down. Sell a little more to cover the gap, and your healthcare bill can double on top of it. That is not one loss. That is 2 losses stacked on top of each other at the exact moment you have the least room to absorb either one. Now picture the retiree who already decided to pay full price for coverage from the start. They are not tracking MAGI to the penny, checking every withdrawal against a moving target. When the market drops, they can pivot to cash reserves or even a margin loan against their portfolio, without worrying that one extra dollar of reported income triggers a $25,000 healthcare penalty on top of everything else. Their flexibility did not disappear the moment the market got hard. It got more valuable. Here is why this matters more than it looks. The average bear market takes about 2.5 years, roughly 30 months, to fully recover, according to Yardeni research. Ask yourself honestly whether a strategy built around protecting a subsidy can actually survive 30 months of restricted, carefully managed income, while the market is doing exactly what it wants, regardless of your spreadsheet. A market does not check your MAGI worksheet before it drops, and it will not wait for open enrollment to recover. Plan for that timeline, not the shorter one you are hoping for. With the risk side of this out in the open, let's get into the actual playbook for 2026. The real options on the table, from COBRA to the marketplace to paying out of pocket entirely. Once you accept that paying full price might genuinely be the smarter move, the next question is practical. What are your actual options in 2026, and which one fits your situation? Start with COBRA. For the first 18 months after you leave a job, COBRA usually beats a full-price marketplace plan because you are still paying your old employer's group rate, plus a small 2% administration fee, not the individual market rate. If your former employer had strong group coverage, COBRA can be the cheapest bridge you will find in that first year and a half, even without any subsidy attached to it. It will not stay the cheapest option forever, though, so treat it as a bridge, not a permanent plan, and check the actual premium quote before assuming anything. After that window closes, you land on the ACA marketplace itself. And this is where silver loading becomes relevant. Silver plans are built to work best with subsidies. So if you are chasing the discount, silver is usually the plan advisors point you toward. But if you have already decided to pay full price, silver is not automatically your best option anymore. Gold and platinum plans, which usually cost more up front, often come with lower deductibles and lower out-of-pocket costs across the year, which can make more sense once the subsidy is off the table entirely. Some people look at short-term or private health plans as a workaround. Be careful here. Rules in 2024 and 2025 limited many of these plans to around 4 months of coverage, and they are usually built around excluding anything close to a pre-existing condition. For most people over 60 with any real health history, this route tends to be more of a trap than a bridge. Here is a useful target number while you compare all of this. In 2026, the standard Medicare Part B premium sits at $202.90 a month. That is roughly what your health coverage costs once you turn 65 and age into Medicare. Your real goal, in the years before that, is bridging the gap to that number as efficiently as you can, not necessarily as cheaply as you can on paper. I remember going through a 140-page summary of benefits with a client just last week. It is genuinely built to make you give up halfway through and just pick whatever the last plan on the list happens to be. Do not let it. Read the actual numbers, not just the plan name. Even with all of this laid out clearly, there is still one psychological barrier that stops most retirees, something like 90% of them, from simply paying the premium and moving on with their life. If you have gotten this far and still feel resistance to just paying full price, that is not irrational. There is a real bias working against you here, called loss aversion. You feel the loss of a $2,000 monthly premium far more sharply than you feel the gain of a $2,500,000 portfolio quietly growing in the background. One is a bill you see every month. The other is just a number that goes up on a statement you barely look at. It can genuinely feel like a success penalty. You saved for 30 years. You did everything right. And now the system is asking you for $30,000 a year just for health coverage, on top of everything else you have already paid into over your working life. It is fair to feel like that is close to a scam, because emotionally, it registers exactly like one. None of that makes the feeling wrong. It just means the feeling and the actual math are measuring two different things, and it helps to notice which one you are reacting to before you decide. Here is a reframe worth sitting with. Stop treating healthcare as a tax on your success. Treat it instead as a retirement bridge expense, a fixed cost that only lasts 3 to 5 years, the gap between when you stop working and when Medicare takes over. Once you turn 65, that cost typically drops by around 70%. It is not forever. It is a short, defined bridge, not a permanent toll on the rest of your life. If you have the assets to cover it, buying your own freedom from constant MAGI tracking may be the single best investment decision available to you in this stretch of retirement. Not because the subsidy math is wrong, because your time, in your 60s, is not a renewable resource the way your portfolio is. Let's bring this all the way back to where we started. That $84,600 cliff is real, and the subsidy behind it is real money. But it is a choice, not a law of nature. You can choose to build your entire early retirement around staying under that line. Or you can choose to look at the actual cost of that choice, in lifestyle, in Roth growth, in flexibility during a downturn, and decide it is not worth it for your situation. That is really the whole shift this video is asking you to make. Not a new formula, not a new account type, just a willingness to put your actual life on one side of the scale and the subsidy on the other. Honestly, before you commit to years of tracking a number most people have never even heard of, do not let a $25,000 subsidy wag a $2 million dog. The whole point of building that kind of portfolio was never to end up managing your life around a single line on a tax form. I don't know your specific health history, your state, or the exact plans available where you live, so please run these actual numbers with your CPA or a fee-only advisor before you make any real moves here. This is the framework. The specific numbers are yours to check, and that is really the entire message of this video, nothing more. If this helped you see the middle wealthy trap a little more clearly, stick around. We will be doing a deeper dive soon on the broader 2026 tax cliff and how it connects to everything we just walked through.